Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's event, Supporting Our Shared Future by Investing in College Completion. My name is Mamie Voight, and I'm the interim president of the Institute for Higher Education Policy, or IHEP. And we are delighted to be hosting today's important conversation alongside our co-hosts, the Institute for College Access and Success and Results for America, with support from our friends at Third Way and UnidosUS. We will be using the chat function today to share information with you, so please be sure to keep your eyes on that chat box. College can be transformational. We know that higher education is a pathway to a better living and a better life, but only if students complete their credential. Putting this another way, to realize the benefits that higher education can provide, students must cross the college finish line. Right now, across America, there are at least 36 million people who have some college but no awarded degree. And students of color and students from low-income backgrounds are less likely to graduate than their white and high-income peers. At IHEP, we are changing that through a nationwide completion initiative called Degrees When Due that helps institutions and states use their data to re-engage students who have stopped out and to identify barriers to student success. Through this work, we know the myriad reasons that students may need to stop out before earning their degree. Things like unforeseen expenses or work or caretaking obligations, confusing transfer processes, or well-intended but antiquated requirements like swim tests or applying for graduation. The benefits that these students could be experiencing are impressive, including lower unemployment and higher salaries and better health outcomes and greater community engagement. Today, you'll hear more about the importance of college completion. You'll hear directly from a student about how support can be the difference between continuing and needing to stop out. You'll hear from programs across the country, including Degrees When Due participants and programs in TICAS's communities of practice. Programs that are working as hard as their capacity will allow to boost completion in their communities. And you'll hear how program capacity, human, financial, and technological, has been stretched beyond thin, particularly since March of 2020. And you'll hear what can happen when we prioritize and invest in college completion. As you tune in, I encourage you to listen for three things: our past, our present, and our future. Number one, listen for the history. Since its founding, our higher education system has excluded many populations, namely Black, Latinx, Indigenous, underrepresented Asian American Pacific Islander students, and students from low-income backgrounds. Listen for this marginalization and how its effects are still seen today, including in completion numbers. Second, listen to understand our present. Much of our country, including higher education, has been hit hard by the pandemic. And we see many colleges and universities, particularly those who serve underserved communities, working hard, applying evidence-based practices and new promising practices that are getting promising results. And number three, listen to the potential for a brighter, more fair, equitable, and just future. Investing in equity-focused and student-centered interventions will expand institutional capacity, human, financial, and technological, to support students and, in turn, our shared future. I'm now honored to introduce U.S. Senator from New Mexico, Martin Heinrich, a staunch supporter of accessible, affordable, and equitable higher education. Senator Heinrich believes in ensuring everyone is able to reach their full potential, regardless of race, background, zip code, or any other factor. From calling to increase the Pell Grant to understanding the unique circumstances of rural colleges and tribal colleges, Senator Heinrich is a champion for today's students. After Senator Heinrich, you'll hear from U.S. Representative from Texas, Joaquin Castro, followed by Representative Mikie Sherrill from New Jersey, three of many across the country who support the College Completion Fund. And then Kelly McManus, Director of Higher Education at Arnold Ventures, will moderate today's panel. I am pleased to turn to Senator Heinrich to share with you why now is the time to make a once-in-a-generation investment in college completion.
I want to thank all of you, all the education leaders and the advocates who are joining us today. We're here to fight for a fundamental shift in the way that we think about student success in higher education. I'm fully on board with President Biden's plans to make college education truly the key to unlocking career opportunities and long-term economic success, accessible and affordable for all American families. As someone who grew up in a working class family where my mother never finished high school and my father didn't finish college, I saw how many doors my college education unlocked. But I think it's past time for us to recognize that improved access to college is just the beginning. Making the first years of community college free or expanding the Pell Grant will make a real difference for affordability and access. But that doesn't address all of the real life challenges that can stand in the way of a student's success once they're on campus. The pandemic disrupted so many students' educations and threw curveballs at families across our country. But even before that, our higher education system and the way we support it has not adapted to the reality that more than 1 in 5 college students are also parents. If parents are able to find time to attend school, they have to fit their class schedule around their jobs, around their child's school and their childcare hours. And all of this limits parents' access to a full and rigorous class schedule. And it extends the number of semesters that a parent is in school, which consequently increases their student debt load. I see helping parenting college students complete their degrees as an integral part of the bipartisan two-generation solutions that I've been proud to advance alongside Senator Susan Collins for a number of years now. Two-generation solutions use evidence-based programs to better align the way that we support parents and children so that families can overcome barriers and achieve success together. Addressing the needs of parenting college students and helping them complete their education is a perfect example of this. Colleges and universities also need to adapt to a reality in which most of their students are not living on campus anymore. Around half of college students in America are going to school part-time while working to support their families. And a significant number of students pursuing their college degree are also navigating immense food and housing insecurity challenges. In one example of this from my home state of New Mexico State University has need to expand its services at the on-campus food bank called the Aggie Cupboard to address growing food insecurity among its student community. Many college students are also returning to the classroom later in life, rather than going down what we tend to think of as the traditional path from high school directly to a 4-year university or to a trade certification program. And today's students are coming to campus from diverse cultural backgrounds and so many different walks of life. Many college students are also veterans or undocumented or are the first in their families to attend college. We should celebrate the fact that so many of these students are pursuing their education. But the fact is that federal education policies and funding support for colleges and universities have not caught up with the realities facing today's student bodies. We focus for so long on how we can get students into college. I'd argue that we need to focus much more on how to help students get through college. That means investing in and scaling proven and evidence-based programs that help the diverse range of students that colleges are serving today actually complete their degrees and their certifications. Completion is absolutely key to achieving the long-term career success that is the promise of higher education. Without completion, far too many students are taking on massive student loan debt that they can't pay back and seeing little economic return. This means that pursuing the very opportunities that are supposed to be offering us the promise of achieving greater success is putting too many of us deeper in the hole in the first place. That's especially the case for those who have the most to gain from college, but can least afford to take on all the additional costs. In my own state of New Mexico, we have invested so much in helping students from many backgrounds access and afford a college education. As a result, we're seeing relatively high rates of college enrollment. But with many of our state's college students facing some of those very real life circumstances that I was talking about, our state has not been as successful at helping New Mexicans complete their degrees. Over recent years, only around 40% of first-time freshmen in our state have completed their degree. We need to do much, much better than that. But that will require sustained focus and sustained resources. That's why I'm so proud to be part of a broad coalition of advocates and educators that is calling on Congress and the Biden administration to focus on college completion. I'm pleased to announce today that I'll be introducing the College Completion Fund Act in the Senate to establish a first of its kind federal fund to invest in evidence-based student support services to help students from diverse backgrounds complete those degrees. President Biden's American Families Plan included $62 billion to establish a college completion fund. Our coalition is calling for leaders in the House and the Senate to make sure that that final version of the Build Back Better plan that we take up and pass into law later this year includes a college completion fund. The legislation I'll be introducing in the Senate next week would authorize the full $62 billion over the next 10 years for this newly established college completion fund. The Department of Education would distribute these funds to states based on a formula using census tract poverty data. It's important to use this formula funding rather than a competitive grant process to make sure we're actually targeting the under-resourced schools with students in the most need. In order to receive these funds, states will need to develop strategic plans to increase graduation and completion rates for all students enrolled in their public colleges and universities. These plans will need to particularly focus on strategies to support students from low-income backgrounds and historically underrepresented communities, first-generation college enrollees, parenting students, students with disabilities, veteran students. Colleges can use these funds for a wide variety of evidence-based and promising practices that support student retention, completion, and ultimately success. That includes comprehensive academic support services such as faculty and peer counseling. They can also be used to provide direct student support, mental health services, childcare, transportation, emergency financial assistance, food and housing assistance, career coaching, and work-based learning opportunities. Finally, these funds can help colleges collect the real-time data on student progress and create incentives to keep those students on track. There are great examples all across the country of student support programs that are demonstrating success in improving completion and retention. In New Mexico, I'm particularly proud of the success of Central New Mexico Community College's Connect program. This program has proven successful at supporting retention and graduation by reaching out to students individually, identifying their strengths, anticipating, even removing their barriers, and helping them navigate systems and resources. The College Completion Fund will help us finally identify and scale investment in this type of program to help many more students complete their education. And it'll provide the flexibility necessary to allow each school to make these programs work well for their unique context and student population. I'm so pleased to be joined by Representatives Joaquin Castro and Mikie Sherrill, who have been some of the greatest champions for college completion funding in the U.S. House of Representatives. But before we turn it over to them, I want to again say thank you to all of our coalition partners for building support for this incredible effort all across the country. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joaquin Castro, and I proudly represent my hometown of San Antonio, Texas, in the U.S. House of Representatives. And I'm in my 5th term, and I serve, among other committees, on the Education and Labor Committee, and also served in the Texas legislature for 10 years before this, and served as vice chair of the Higher Education Committee for a few years. So this issue of college completion is one that's incredibly important to me for a few reasons. First, San Antonio is a town with many colleges and universities and thousands of students, some who are just out of high school, but many others who are coming back to college to complete their degrees. So thousands of people that are enrolled in our colleges and universities that are trying to finish off their degrees and graduate. And also, because over the years, as I worked on these higher education issues, I noticed something that for me was really quite disturbing, which is we focused a lot of our attention on opening the doors of higher education, of colleges and universities, to communities over the years, and have done a pretty good job of that, or at least better than we had decades ago. But our focus on entry and opening those doors has not been met by a focus on making sure that once people enroll, they actually complete their degrees and they graduate and they're able to go on to their career dreams. In other words, they're able to go on to the career dreams that brought them to the college or the university in the first place. And so that's why I'm excited about the College Completion Fund, because it's finally an opportunity for the Biden administration working with Congress to appropriate resources and funds and a focus on that second piece, which is once you get people in the door, you make sure that you work with them, provide wraparound services for things like childcare, any mental health services, for orientation, helping to coach them along the way to make sure that not only can they start college, but they actually finish and graduate. The enormity of this challenge really can't be overstated. I have to say that in parts of Texas, and I know other states throughout the country, some of our community college graduation rates and completion rates, for example, are lower than our high school graduation rates. So oftentimes our colleges have been like sieves. There are a lot of folks that go in, but only a fraction or percentage, at some places 15%, that actually end up completing. So I see this College Completion Fund as an opportunity to do right by these folks who are earnestly trying to make it and finish their degrees, complete their degrees, but they face things like the work school tug of war. So many of our students are in this work school tug of war where they don't make enough money to where they're able to say, well, I'm just not going to go to college because I'm set for the rest of my life. So they're trying to improve their situation and get a degree and go on to their dream. But like I said, they don't have enough money, so they're having to work. They're working 10 hours, 20 hours, some of them trying to work full time. And ultimately what I've seen over the years is that too often work wins out, and people's dreams of becoming a nurse or a doctor or an engineer or whatever it may be, whatever their dream is, that dream ultimately gives way to the immediacy of having to put food on the table for themselves, oftentimes for their families, or helping out other families with costly things. And so this will help end the work school tug of war. It'll go a long way in ending the work school tug of war. I think it's also going to be helpful in making sure that we focus on best practices. I know that that's a term that's thrown around a lot in different policy discussions, best practices. But in this arena, it's especially important because as we were navigating the challenges of higher education in Texas, we found that oftentimes in some jurisdiction, whether it was El Paso or Houston or Dallas or the Rio Grande Valley or somewhere else, colleges and universities were doing many things right, but there were other areas where they were not. There were real gaps or holes or vulnerabilities in what they were doing, and some other part of the state was doing it right, but people were not talking to each other, and those best practices were not scaled up so that the entire state, all the community college systems, the university systems, benefited from those best practices. So this will be an opportunity to make sure that we follow best practices. And I'll give you one example on that. In Texas, we had big challenges with developmental education, or what used to be called remedial education. And you know that developmental education for many students is the graveyard of higher education. And so I see this as an opportunity for us to really focus on that and figure out what the best practices are for folks who need developmental education and developmental courses, and make sure that they don't give up because they're having problems getting through the developmental courses before they take credit courses later on. And so that's one of the challenges that I think that this can help take on, is working with the colleges and universities on scaling up and adopting best practices as well. So I'm really excited about it. I hope that you can tell this is an issue and an area that I've spent so many years working on, is getting students to college, but also getting them to graduate. And I know that for each of you, your work and your passion is equally matched with mine. So thank you for everything that you're doing. I'm going to be working really hard to make sure that we're successful in getting the College Completion Fund done. Take care, y'all.
Hi, this is Congresswoman Mikie Sherrill. You know, for so many Americans, completing college is key to their path into the middle class, to better wages and providing for their families. So that's why the College Completion Fund is so critically important. Too many people struggle to finish college once they've started, with many of life's setbacks. And now more than ever, as people have struggled to make it through COVID, we need to make sure that they have the ability to finish their college degree, raise their wages, enter the workforce, and really have a chance at being in the middle class. So thanks so much for all of your work. I really appreciate it.
How inspiring to follow such great policymakers who are clearly passionate about the College Completion Fund. My name is Kelly McManus. I am the Director of Higher Education at Arnold Ventures, and I'm thrilled to be with you all today to have an impressive group of panelists talk about the importance of college completion. We have a limited time together, so I am going to keep the introduction short and get right into the conversation. I do encourage you, though, to look at the chat to learn more about our panelists. So today you will be hearing from Amanda Martinez, a senior policy analyst at UnidosUS, formerly the National Council of La Raza, Leilani Mercado, the Chief Program Officer at Project Quest in San Antonio, Tanya Crawford-Gross, the Associate Vice President of Retention and Student Success at Kentucky's Bluegrass Community and Technical College, and Chandra Scott, the Executive Director of Alabama Possible, a nonprofit organization breaking down barriers to prosperity in Alabama. So I want to start where both Representative Castro and Senator Heinrich started, which is we have traditionally, in our country focused more on trying to get people to school, but not as much focus on getting them through school. So I'd love to start and hear from y'all on the kinds of barriers. What keeps students from completing? What are some of the barriers that they encounter on their path to a degree? And how do those vary for today's students, particularly students of color, students from low-income backgrounds, students who have to work, and caretaking students? So Chandra, I'd love to start with you.
Sure, Kelly. So first, I want to say I'm so glad to be a part of this conversation because there has never been a more important time to focus on post-secondary completion. As our country and our communities continue to weather economic instability, the pandemic, as well as the most recent wave of racial reckonings, we've seen how barriers threaten the success of today's college students and derail their plans to complete a degree. I would say a listing of barriers, just a small listing of them, just to get us started from my thoughts, are just a lack of equitable and affordable access to broadband. Then there's this whole narrative around debt forgiveness for adult learners and the barriers that it brings along with low to no technological capacity at our institutions, especially those who serve a large population of students of color and adult learners and those from low-income backgrounds. But in Alabama, I'm pleased to say we've also seen how innovative and equity-driven programs have responded to these challenges and have supported these students through these uncertain times. And I look forward to sharing that later in our conversation.
Thank you for having me. There are so many barriers that our families are facing today. Academically, being challenged to even start the classes that they need to start, financially having the resources to even start classes. And Representative Castro stated it very well that families are challenged with having to go to work or go to school, and they have to face those challenges every day because they either have to pay their bills and survive, or they have an opportunity to go to college. And a lot of times the financial responsibilities will take over, and that person then has to quit school. But there's several challenges, but there's also several opportunities, like Chandra said, where we can collaborate with our community colleges to provide braided support for our participants, so that they don't fail, they don't quit school, and that they are successful. But it really takes a lot of support from the workforce intermediaries like Project Quest, and also the community colleges working together to really support a participant from end to end.
And Tanya?
I appreciate this question because it's so important that everyone listening today understand the challenges that can lead to students stopping out. As open access institutions, community colleges are often the entry points for low-income students, students of color, and adult students. These students face a myriad of barriers that can disrupt their educational careers. Their educational aspirations can be derailed by even the smallest disruption, an illness, academic struggles, financial setback, not to mention a pandemic, the likes we've not seen in generations. Institutions must be committed and have the structures in place to re-engage with these students in order to support their goal of earning an academic credential. These supports must be available not only to support the academic challenges, but also the non-academic barriers to success. For far too long, when a student fell behind or stopped out, it was seen as an individual failing instead of a systemic problem in which the higher education institution shared the responsibility for ensuring student success. As part of the Degrees When Due initiative, Bluegrass Community and Technical College launched Project Finish, which was an effort to reach out to students who left the institution before earning a degree. The aim of the pilot was to make students aware of how close they were to completing their credential and to encourage re-enrollment to complete their degree. BCTC is committed to solving the persistent problem of demographic disparities, and our institutional leaders place an emphasis on looking critically at our student success policies and practices to make the reforms necessary to maximize a return for all students. As part of our efforts to create a culture of care, at BCTC, we regularly conduct call campaigns. Our message to students is, you are part of a community that really cares about your success, and that success includes completing college.
That's great. So one of the things that we know is that the supports that students need, they don't just come out of nowhere. They don't just appear. It takes a lot of effort and really dedicated people who are committed to student success. And a program leader recently shared with us that their team is small but mighty, and mighty tired. And I can imagine that that is true. Y'all, especially those of y'all who are directly serving students, are doing so often with very little capacity, both technological, human capacity, and financial capacity. And you are serving students at schools that have also historically been under-resourced in our system. So I'm curious to hear more about the capacity challenges, and in particular, especially in this moment, as you know, currently right now in about 30 minutes, the House Education and Labor Committee is going to be voting on a bill that would put $9 billion into college completion. As you heard from Senator Heinrich, he is pushing for the full $62 billion, which would be incredible. Talk about the capacity issues you face, and also what this federal funding could do for you. And Tanya, we'll start with you.
Yes, the challenges to supporting the re-engagement process for colleges have to do, as you just mentioned, with the ability to re-engage with this substantial population of stop-outs. The institutional needs include having the technology, the personnel, and the funds to support the returning student. The most significant barrier for students is often the finances needed to return, finances to pay the tuition and fees associated with re-enrolling. And many students must also overcome the financial challenge of an outstanding balance and the resulting stranded credits that must be attended to before they can re-enroll. Our review of student accounts found small balances of only a few dollars up to thousands of dollars owed to the institution. The Project Finish initiative, piloted by Bluegrass, provided debt forgiveness and a small scholarship for near completers who had 45 or more credit hours. This financial capacity is critically important to help students successfully finish their degree. The need to support and improve college completion really cannot be overstated. It is an investment from which we can all benefit. The ability for post-secondary institutions, and in my case, a two-year institution, to invest funds into the completers and near completers yields more graduates who transfer to a four-year institution. And additionally, for community colleges, by awarding more certificates and diplomas, we are able to get more trained citizens into the workforce and provide more economic opportunities for underrepresented populations.
Chandra?
Sure. So I would say in Alabama alone, there are over 62,000 adult learners who you can categorize as having some college, no degree. In our state, we have a post-secondary attainment goal of having 500,000 Alabamians that, are highly skilled, a valuable credential that will fulfill our workforce by 2025. However, to meet that goal, we must rethink how we invest in our institutions that are being very intentional about re-engaging adult learners. Here we have an Alabama Degrees When Due cohort of 4 institutions that were doing just that were focusing specifically on re-engaging adult learners across our state. Now, I will be honest, I'm that person that's a little nosy and like to understand the process. And so I participated to look at what the auditing process looked like at the institution. And I have to be honest, I was quite shocked to see how this was manually done when we're in a time where literally I can send money to someone across the country using my mobile device, but yet we're still having to manually audit to re-engage learners in our institutions. This cannot be the practice in which we're engaging students. It limits the number of students we can re-engage. So if we're looking at 62,000 adult learners across our state, but we're having to manually go through each one of those, can you only imagine how much limitations that is giving our leaders at our institutions to be able to re-engage those adults? The technological capacity is a major barrier to getting more adults across the finish line. And as we all know, especially those who like to talk about the business line of it, this is a workforce strategy, getting more adults back into education across the finish line. So truly, if we cannot invest in the technological capacity of our institution, it is going to be a barrier to our workforce development.
Leilani, what about y'all?
So I agree with both ladies about the technology being a divisive key for individuals trying to go to college. But I also think that we need to meet people where they're at. And so some of our participants are not even quite ready for the technology to even navigate registering for classes at a community college. And so what we consider are basically the most important key to our organization is the one-on-one coaching with our participants so that they can help them navigate those systems. They need a career coach, is what we call them, to really guide them on how to register for classes, how to use technology, how to remove the barriers that they might have while they're in training. And I think that those resources are just as important as getting navigated into a community college system. In addition, providing customized support services for individuals is extremely important. Not everybody comes in and has the same needs. Some may need mental health counseling, some may need academic remediation, and some may need financial resources and support services to help them navigate going to school. And so those are the key factors that I think for our organization, especially here in San Antonio, where we have a very low high school graduation rate, is needed.
Great, thanks. I will say I am honored to be a part of this powerhouse group of women. Although I will say we were hoping to have a student with us today. So often in our policy conversations here in DC, where I physically am, we talk about students, but we don't actually hear directly from them. And so Terrance Wiggins, a student at Georgia State, was scheduled to be with us today. But as can happen in the life of a senior in college, especially, he has had a last minute scheduling conflict. But he did put together a video for us just to quickly share how a program at Georgia State, the MAPS program, a proactive data-informed advising program, helped him on his way. So I'll turn it over to Terrance now.
My name is Terrance Wiggins. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, from the east side of Atlanta, and I grew up basically in Atlanta my whole life. So I attended Arabian Mountain High School, which is over in Latonia, Georgia, and it was also a theme school. So it was actually not public, everybody couldn't get in it, and you also had to keep a 2.5 GPA just to stay in the school. So it actually brought me to a better understanding of school, just how you have to stay on top of the game even in high school, and how it would be in college. So it also prepared me for college. I would say also I'm a photographer and videographer. This is my senior year at Georgia State, and I started off as a business major, and later, just figuring out what things that I like to do and things I don't like to do, I found an interest in photography and videography, which caused me to change my major to media entrepreneurship. Throughout my time here at GSU, I found it very difficult to, schedule your classes on your own. With GSU MAPS programs, they have advisors who reach out to you to make sure that students are on track, are doing what they're supposed to do. They're making sure that the students are ahead of the game. Most students try to wait till last minute to try to register for classes when most of them are already filled. But when you have the MAPS program, they have advisors who will contact you through email to come out and, just tell you hey, next semester classes are opening up soon. Let's go ahead and get this schedule situated. So when the class is opening up for registration, you can be one of the first people in the class to get it out the way. I'll also say it was a substantial part of me being a successful student at GSU. Without helping with classes, I honestly probably would be picking the wrong classes each semester, honestly. That's just facts. Just me looking at the classes that I was supposed to take, and then classes that I probably would want to take on my own, that would just lead me into another direction that will have me graduating at a later time period. A lot of students do need help. As far as me, I come from a home where we don't have it all the time. My parents just can't give me everything that I need. Some things I have to go out and I have to work for on my own. And then one of those things being school. Getting up there in age, my parents have other things they have to work for, bills due, just groceries, taking care of family, just everything. So I had to step out on my own and get a job so that I can pay for my school. And I'm not always able to pay for the full thing. So just like this past summer, I was able to receive a grant from the school, which is the PRG grant. And basically, they covered the rest of my costs for my classes for the semester. And honestly, that really helped me. So one thing I just wanted the policymakers to see is that we as students, we do need help. And we're looking for more and more ways that we can see that we can get our school paid for, or is anything, grants, just or just without getting so deep into debt, because that's my personal thing. I don't want to take out a whole bunch of loans, which will lead me later into debt when I'm in school to find a better life.
So Amanda, I want to bring you in after that. So we heard from Terrance directly from the student. We have heard from both nonprofit and school leaders here on our panel. Let's go up to the policy level and what's happening across the country. What are you seeing in kind of national completion trends, and how do you think that the College Completion Fund would help institutions better serve their students?
Well, first I want to give a shout out to Terrance. Hopefully if he sees this, I think what his story shared was true and real, and really is the transformative change that we can see across the board. But back to the question, Kelly, that you posed, the short answer is completion trends are dire. They were dire before the pandemic, and now they're probably going to be catastrophic just because of the disenrollment that we're seeing and the stop outs that we're seeing now. But why are we talking about completion? Terrance kind of encapsulated it, is that, the transformation that higher education promises is through completion, right? If you don't complete, your complete life trajectory could be derailed into a completely different negative net benefit. Higher education the promise only comes after you finish the line. And what we're seeing, unfortunately, across the nation is dire completion trends that are stratified across racial and ethnic and socioeconomic lines. For instance, when looking at a 2014 cohort of students trying to graduate in the timeline of 6 years, we see that Black and Latinx students graduate less than half compared to their white their white counterparts in that same cohort. White students graduated at over 67%. So that percentage point gap, or that completion gap, is over 18 points. That's not, that was pre-pandemic. Imagine what we're going to be seeing in the next future when we see future cohorts. And that was already dire. And if we don't do anything now, if we're not proactive now, that gap is just going to widen. The trajectory of our students who need these funds the most and this help the most right now are going to be suffering. And that's not just for individuals, right? That's going to be for their families are going to be suffering, and it's going to be suffering for the communities they're living in. It's going to be a suffering experience for the nation. So that's why we're having this conversation today. But really, we should have hope. I'm going to bring in the hope of the evidence-based programs that we've heard today from all the leaders across the board who've answered those other questions. It really should give us hope. It should give us energy to be a part of this conversation today. It should really give members of Congress, excitement to finally be able to put something forward that works. Like, for example, at Georgia State, we see that from Terrance's experience. Specifically, that program, the MAPS program, improved 9 percentage points of their graduation rate across racial lines, racial and ethnic lines, and income level lines. And it closed those gaps just at Georgia State alone, which is very impressive. Other programs mentioned here, like Project Quest in Texas, they are able to provide holistic supports. But really, what did that take? It took human capacity, it took technological capacity, and it takes financial capacity. And in order to do that, we can scale these at a statewide and an institutional and nationwide way. And while these states like Georgia and Texas and others who are implementing these programs, siloed, they really need help to scale them. This is exactly what the federal government's role is. So we really do need to support the College Completion Fund in whatever way we do. Everyone needs to be a part of it. And I think advocates are clearly aligned on this, and we have a solution in front of us.
Great. So I'm going to one last question for the panel before we get to Q&A from the audience, but it's going to key off of what Amanda, you just said. Like, this is the role of the federal government. This is what we should be doing. And so I'd love to hear from all of y'all. What is one thing that you want policymakers to take away from today's conversation? And Chandra, we'll start with you.
Sure. So first, this has been an amazing, amazing panel. I'm just honored to be amongst all of you. But I would say during the onset of the pandemic, we saw great attention given to K-12 students and increasing their access to broadband. So they had equitable access for remote learning, right? This same attention and intentionality must be provided to post-secondary learners. This will enable our institutions to quickly re-engage our adult learners and also provide them with individualized entry pathways. But this has to be done by automating the auditing process, degree auditing process. To me, that was the one thing that I would like to leave behind is for them to remember that something must be done.
Great. Leilani?
The number one thing I'd like policymakers to understand is that workforce development is hard and it takes time. You cannot transform individuals' lives in 6 months. It does take a longer term investment, not only in the individual through human capacity, but also through financial resources to support that individual. Again, we are meeting people that are further behind educationally, and they need time to catch up to be at college level, just to even enter a community college. And those things take time and resources. And so again, those are the things that I hope our policymakers understand, that the investment can't be a one-time investment for 1 year. It has to be a longer term investment financially and supporting the human capacity of that.
I'd like to share what one of my Kentucky Degrees When Due colleagues said. She put it best. It's a tragedy that there are so many students who have so many credits, but no degree. There is more that we can do to help re-engage these students who stopped out short of a degree and support them across the degree finish line. Funding the College Completion Fund can make that happen by supporting evidence-based, equity-centered, student-focused approaches to student re-engagement.
And Amanda?
Yeah, I think the last message is that, clearly we have a catastrophic problem in front of us. But there's hope. And if we want to close equity gaps, realize those economic, both financial or non-financial economic benefits that higher education can have towards our society. And if we want to be aligned with the Build Back Better message and campaign, then we've got to build capacity and support college completion, support these amazing practitioners on the ground to know what they're doing. In particular, we know that if we're funding these programs and practices, who's going to benefit is the students we care about the most, which are those who've been completely shut out historically from college, and they're continuously being pushed to the wayside if we don't do anything now. And we're just going to, continue to create inequities if we don't do anything now. So this is your one-time chance, and it's now. You can be proactive about it. Let's do it.
So unfortunately, we are getting close to the hour. It is amazing how quickly these conversations can go by. So I'm going to try to combine the spirit of a lot of the questions in the Q&A into one. And I'm just going to ask everybody to do just a very quick, 15-second answer if possible. Some of the questions are like, when we're talking about the College Completion Fund, we know right now the House is proposing $9 billion. Senator Heinrich and the Biden administration proposed $62 billion. Just give us a sense of what you could do if we went with that bigger number. With that $62 billion, what would the world look like 10 years from now? And I'll open that up to anybody.
I'll take that one. So I would say in Alabama, I like to look at this as we have a stranded workforce that exists amongst us. And the only reason why they're stranded is because they haven't been able to have the opportunities financially or just whatever opportunity barriers may be in their way to get the degree that they need to better themselves, to enter the workforce with a better wage and more sustainable job. And so to me, in 10 years, we wouldn't have the stranded workforce. There will be people taking advantage of the opportunity that a post-secondary credential gives them to better their family's lives, to break generational poverty. To me, that's what this is all about. At the end of the day, we're trying to end poverty in our country, and we know education and entertainment is a way to do that. So I want the bigger number so we can no longer have this stranded workforce across our nation.
I think that vision sounds great, but Leilani, jump in. What would you add?
They have to think of that $62 billion as an investment in their overall communities, right? We've seen that if you invest in an individual through financial resources and education, and they attain their goals and then go into from poverty to middle class, that they will then become a contributor of our community and our society, and that uplifts the entire San Antonio community. So if they think of it as a longer term investment, almost a 401k, that if you invest in this and the long-term effects are that your community and the people that live in your community will be better, that's how they have to look at it. But it is, again, a longer term investment that will flourish if you invest in the people that live in your community.
And just to, because people love that, policymakers love the data and numbers and see how much they're going to get back in tax revenue. Third Way just put out kind of a thought experiment about what would the CUNY ASAP, if it was replicated across the nation, it would equal 1.56 million in extra associate degrees over 10 years. So that's you're impacting millions of people. And then that would hopefully translate to millions of additional workers who are career ready and workforce ready for the nation. And then what is that going to equal to? More tax revenue, about 100 billion they estimate. So plugging in Third Way's actual numbers, because policymakers like to have clear investments and numbers on their way.
Tanya, any last vision thoughts for us?
No, this all sounds wonderful. I was just going to add that, as a community college, we promote access, but we really do need this additional investment to help get students to be successful and get them across the finish line. Again, more skilled workforce, the benefits to having a more educated workforce and community are well seen, not just in economics, but well-being, health. So all of the things that we see now that are amplified with the pandemic also could be impacted with this support as well.
Well, thank you all so much. You've been, like I said, a powerhouse panel that I have been honored to be a part of. To everyone whose questions we did not get to, I apologize. There was just too much to talk about in this time, but I would encourage you to reach out to any of the hosts, the host organizations here, and also follow the conversation online using the hashtag College Completion Fund, where we can talk about things like how to measure outcomes and how the different dollars could be allocated to different programs. But now to close us out, it is my pleasure to turn it over to Jacob Frary, the president and CEO of the Texas Association of Community Colleges and the chairperson of the IHEP Board of Directors. So Jacob.
Thank you, Kelly. Good afternoon, colleagues. On behalf of IHEP, with our co-host TICAS and Results for America, and with the support of Third Way and UnidosUS, thank you for being a part of today's conversation on college completion. In my role at the Texas Association of Community Colleges, I know that community colleges disproportionately serve students of color and students from low-income families. And I know that right now, only 1/3 of students earn a 2-year degree within 3 years. At 4-year universities, only half of students from low-income backgrounds graduate within 6 years. As Senator Heinrich, I think, adequately stated earlier, these outcomes often mean the students have taken on student debt and opportunity costs of attending, but are not yet benefiting from their college degree. We thank Senator Heinrich, Representatives Castro and Sherrill, our moderator, Kelly, and each of our distinguished panelists, Amanda, Chandra, Lilani, Tanya, and yes, Terrance, for recognizing the importance of supporting today's students over the finish line, that focus that Representative Castro talked about, and into a better living that higher education promises. To realize the college completion outcomes that we aspire for all of our students, we need the combination of 3 key elements. Intentionality, and we heard that today so eloquently from all of our panelists. Innovation and evidence-based strategies, which I think is important, and certainly institutional capacity, which I think is at the core of the College Completion Fund that we are advancing. Our panelists today demonstrated the types of intentionality that we need across higher education and frankly, across our great nation. To solve for college completion, we need to be intentional about who we serve and which strategies best work for these students. We need to further innovation and engage new and proven strategies like those that we heard today. In Texas, for example, all 50 community colleges are implemented guided pathways at scale. Grounded in research and based on the American Association of Community Colleges Pathways Project, Texas Pathways is an integrated system-wide approach to student success that guides students from the selection of their high school endorsement all the way through post-secondary education and attainment of high-quality credentials that have value in the marketplace. Guided pathways and all the strategies that we heard today are examples of meeting today's students where they are, as Amanda articulated earlier, centering equity, policies and practices, and putting data and evidence to smart use. To be clear, the work ahead is a tall order. It will require greater capacity in human capacity, as was eloquently said earlier, in financial capacity, and yes, in today's world, in technological capacity. Colleagues, I invite you to embrace the urgency of now. Now is the time to make major investments in college completion. Now is the time to invest and scale promising practices and evidence-based programs. Now is the time to fundamentally change how we think about completion and invest in sustainable supports to get today's students over the finish line. And now is the time to invest in closing equity gaps and building that shared future that we want to see for all of our students, alongside the investments of college affordability and MSIs. Now is the time to make this once in a generation investments in college completion. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.